Hey, sorry to pause your scrolling, but if you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe. It means a lot. Funny how you can sense when a moment is about to carve itself into your memory, even before it happens. That morning carried that weight. The air felt off. Too still, too quiet, like the house was holding its breath. Even the Christmas lights blinked slower, their glow dimmer against the pale winter sky leaking through the windows. The scent of cinnamon rolls drifted from the kitchen. The fireplace crackled like it always did, and the tree stood in the corner, heavy with the same faded ornaments we'd been hanging up since I was a kid. But under the familiar warmth, there was a cold I couldn't shake, a cold that had nothing to do with December. It was the kind of cold that comes when you know, without anyone needing to say it, that you're about to be reminded of your place. Again. Mom stood there, wrapped in that worn velvet robe she always wore for occasions she deemed special. She was beaming, absolutely radiant, as she turned to Ashley, her favorite, holding out a tiny gold-wrapped box like it contained the secrets of the universe. Ashley's eyes lit up, lips already parting into that exaggerated gasp she'd perfected. "Oh my God!" she squealed, before she'd even touched the ribbon. That was her role in this family, the star of the show. She peeled the paper back slowly, dragging it out like we were all gathered for her personal Hallmark Christmas special. And then, there it was, a simple silver key resting in a velvet-lined box. Ashley froze for a heartbeat, then her eyes grew wide, glassy with faux shock. "Is this—" Mom clasped her hands together, voice trembling with pride. "We bought you a house, sweetheart." Like she was announcing a Nobel Prize, like Ashley had cured cancer or saved a village instead of just existing. My stomach twisted. I looked to Dad, hoping for what, I didn't even know. But he nodded, lips pressed tight like this was some sacred rite of passage. Ashley screamed, practically leaping into their arms. Thank you, on repeat, like a wind-up doll. "You'll understand one day," Mom turned to me then, that same soft, condescending smile curling her lips. "When you're older?" I smiled back. Because what else do you do? Rage didn't work here. Honesty was punished. I'd learned a long time ago that smiling was survival. I hadn't even touched my own gift. It sat in my lap, a thin, plain envelope. No ribbon, no gold paper. Dad handed it over after Ashley's performance was done, like an afterthought. "Here," he muttered, like passing me the check for the electric bill. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Inside, one sheet of paper. I didn't look at it right away. Couldn't. My gaze stayed locked on the envelope, my chest tight with something between rage and grief. Because I knew what was written there didn't matter. Not really. The message had been sent the moment that key hit Ashley's palm. In my head, I was already somewhere else, flashing through every moment just like this. Birthdays where Ashley unwrapped designer bags while I got bargain bin sweaters. Dinners where my words dissolved in the air, while Ashley's stories, her bland, boring stories, were met with roaring laughter. The night I won a scholarship, the whole damn thing paid for, and no one came. Because Ashley had a recital. Of course she did. I used to think maybe I was imagining it, maybe I was being dramatic, bitter. But sitting there, that house key gleaming like a crown in Ashley's lap, I knew. I knew exactly who I was to them. The afterthought. The utility. Dad's voice snapped me back. "Aren't you going to open it?" he asked, feigning casual, oblivious to the blade he'd twisted. I unfolded the paper, slowly. His gaze followed, and just for a second, his smug smile slipped. Just enough. That flicker of confusion, then recognition, then guilt? Maybe. Or maybe I imagined that too. The room went still. Ashley clutched her new key like it might float away. Mom cleared her throat but didn't speak. No one did. "You'll understand someday," Mom had said. But the thing was, I already did. And for the first time, I wasn't the one swallowing my words. Not anymore. Not in the way she meant, though. Not even close. I used to tell myself it was just a phase. That one day the scales would balance, and maybe someone in my family would finally see me. Really see me. Not the blurry outline they'd drawn, not the stand-in daughter who filled the space next to Ashley's spotlight. Just me. But the thing about childhood is it doesn't just teach you who you are. It brands you, etches truths into your skin so deep you carry them long after you stop believing. Turns out it was never a phase. It was a ritual, a cycle that played on loop in our house. Birthdays, Christmases, graduations. Every milestone was just another chapter in the same tired story. I still remember one birthday, 9, maybe 10, when I actually woke up excited. Hopeful, even. I'd stayed up late the night before, baking cupcakes with Mom. She kept checking the clock, sighing, reminding me Ashley had ballet rehearsal at dawn. Still, I thought maybe, just maybe. But the next morning, the kitchen was empty. The air smelled faintly of burnt toast, the TV droned in the background, and no one said a word about my birthday. No balloons, no card, not even a hug. Funny, they never forgot Ashley's that year. She got a backyard circus, ponies, a magician, the whole damn neighborhood, and people we barely knew showed up with glitter and bows. I wish I could say I stopped caring after that. But every year, every slight, every shrug of indifference made it harder to lie to myself. Middle school graduation? I finished with honors. Mom didn't even look up from her phone. Too busy texting Ashley's dance coach about regionals. Science fair? Built a hydroelectric dam that actually worked. Took home first place. Dad showed up halfway through, muttered something about a golf game, and disappeared. But when Ashley landed a local shampoo commercial, they threw a party, framed the ad like it was a masterpiece, toasted to her bright future. I never called them out. Not once. I wore my silence like armor, smiling when expected, laughing when it wouldn't make waves. I became so good at disappearing it felt like second nature, like I was part of the damn wallpaper. And Ashley, God, Ashley, she was brilliant at playing the game. She could summon tears like a faucet, twisting every mistake into a tragedy that only our parents could solve. New car? Done. Another failed class? Blame the professor. Another debt, another excuse, and somehow it always worked. They never saw it. Or maybe they did. Maybe it was easier to believe Ashley was delicate and I was the strong one, the reliable daughter, the one who didn't need anything. But they never saw what that strength cost me. The isolation, the quiet fury simmering just beneath my skin. The nights I'd lie awake wondering what crime I'd committed just by being the other daughter. There's one memory that clings hardest. My senior year, academic awards night. I'd clawed my way to the top. 2 part-time jobs, straight A's, a full scholarship. And still, it wasn't enough. When they called my name, the applause rang out. But my eyes went straight to Mom. She was there, front row, scrolling through her phone. Not clapping, not smiling, just scrolling. When I stepped down with my plaque, she glanced up, smirked, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, at least she's good at something." It wasn't just the words, it was the way they sliced through the air, through the applause, through me. My classmates stared at the floor. My teacher squeezed my shoulder in pity. And that was the moment it clicked. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being sensitive. I wasn't bitter. I was invisible, by design. And tell me, have you ever felt that? Like you were just the extra in your own family? Like your wins only mattered if someone else failed first? I ask because maybe I'm not the only one. Years later, I went back, one of those guilt-tripped visits you make out of obligation, not love, and found something I was never supposed to see. And that, well, that changed everything. It happened in the most ordinary way, the kind that catches you off guard because you weren't looking for answers. You'd stopped believing they even existed. My parents' office door creaked open like it had been waiting for me, and there it was. The old wall safe, half cracked, the handle dangling loose. Careless, unlike them. I hadn't come home to snoop or stir up ghosts. Honestly, I didn't even want to be there. It was guilt that dragged me back, a quiet, familiar weight pressing until I caved. My mother's voice had been syrupy sweet on the phone, laced with just enough disappointment to make refusal feel cruel. Your father hurt his back mowing. Could you help? Ashley's busy, of course. Of course, Ashley's always busy. So, I came. Drove past those perfectly trimmed hedges Dad still manicured like they'd be judged by royalty. Parked in the same cracked driveway. Walked through the same house where time had frozen somewhere between Ashley's high school glory days and my own invisible years. Every inch of the place smelled like lemon polish and memories I didn't want. The walls were still lined with Ashley's smiling face, graduation photos, pageant sashes, her perfect teeth gleaming at every angle. My own achievements, tucked away, probably in a drawer somewhere, if they were kept at all. By Saturday, I was counting down the minutes. I'd moved boxes, nodded through dinner conversations about renovations on the lake house I wasn't invited to. Listened as Mom tore into Ashley's boyfriend, her voice softening only when she sighed. You're so lucky not to be dealing with these things. Lucky. Right. That night, sleep felt impossible. The house was too quiet, too heavy with old resentment. I found myself wandering, trailing fingertips along furniture that had never really belonged to me. And then the office door, ajar, like it had been waiting. I told myself to walk away. I knew better. But there was a pull, something deeper than curiosity, something like a starving need to find anything that wasn't hers first. The safe was open just enough. Dad, the man who double-checked every lock and counted receipts twice, had slipped. Or maybe fate was just done playing nice. I knelt slowly, my breath shallow as I pulled it open. Folders, thick, weighty, property deeds, tax forms, boring, predictable. Until my hand brushed against a plain envelope buried beneath it all, unmarked except for Dad's blocky scrawl. To be opened upon death. I should have stopped. I should have slammed that door and walked away, but my hands were already tearing it open. Inside wasn't just a will. It was the will. A newer one. Not the draft they'd paraded years ago, where everything was split fairly. Number this was different. My name was listed first, and not equally. Attached to something I'd never heard of. A property deed, fully paid off, purchased years ago. In my name. No mention of Ashley. No explanation. The room swayed. I scanned the lines again and again, like the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. But they didn't. And that's when I saw the others. Bank statements, transfers that didn't add up, amounts far larger than I'd ever known we had. And then, the final blow. A document with my name, my signature, except it wasn't mine. A forged authorization, dated 2 years back. The blood drained from my face. Someone, family, had used me. My name, my identity, to move money, quietly, repeatedly. I sat there until the house grew cold, until the clock ticked past midnight, surrounded by lies dressed up as legal documents. Every paper felt like a brick added to the weight I'd been carrying my whole life. I didn't confront them. Not then. What was the point? I already knew how that conversation would go. Gaslighted, guilted, told I misunderstood, that it was for the family? I folded the will neatly, slid it back, closed the safe just as carefully as I'd found it. I walked out of that office different, not broken, not angry, just done. I didn't say a word over breakfast the next morning. Just sat there, listening to the clink of forks against porcelain, watching my parents move through the familiar motions like nothing had shifted, like the ground beneath us hadn't cracked wide open. By noon, I'd packed my bag and left, mumbling something about deadlines at work. No one protested. They never did when it came to me. The moment my apartment door clicked shut behind me, I got to work. Quiet, methodical. I ordered credit reports, pulled every financial record I could get my hands on, and called an old college friend, now a Greg, asking if they'd help me navigate a situation I couldn't even explain yet. Not fully. I didn't sleep much that week. Instead, I unraveled a thread so tangled I couldn't tell where it began or how deep it would run. What started as curiosity quickly twisted into something else, something colder. Property deeds, investment accounts, tax shelters, hidden bank accounts. On paper, I owned more than I ever dreamed, things no one had ever told me about, land I'd never seen, accounts opened in my name, signatures that weren't mine. And the worst part? I wasn't surprised. Somewhere deep down, I'd always known my family didn't just overlook me. They used me, but knowing is different from seeing it spelled out in legal documents, from feeling the weight of your own name attached to debts and assets you never agreed to. There's a kind of rage that settles low, quiet, smoldering. The kind you live with so long it feels like part of your skin. I felt it ignite that night. They thought I'd play along forever. They'd bet on me being the good daughter, the reliable one. They never imagined I'd learn how to play a longer game. So I planned. Not an explosion. Not some screaming match they'd brush off as dramatics. I planned with precision. Patience. The way you'd plan a quiet escape from a burning house. My Greg and I dissected every paper, every forged document. The real estate was the worst. My parents' pride and joy, the lake house they flaunted at every family gathering, was leveraged to the hilt. Mortgaged secretly to fund Ashley's failed business, and they'd fallen behind. Badly. The bank was quietly preparing to auction it off. That's when it clicked. That's when everything sharpened. I bought it, quietly, through a third party, layers deep. No trace leading back to me. In a matter of weeks, the lake house, their legacy, was mine. And they didn't even notice. Life carried on like it always had. Mom called with her usual sugar-laced concern, asking if I'd thought about finding something more stable. Dad forwarded job listings like he was doing me a favor. And Ashley, Ashley, sent group texts about her next big thing. A podcast, a new boyfriend, a trip to Maui, all sunshine, all golden. I stayed silent. Let them believe I was right where they left me, small, obedient, grateful. But every text, every backhanded comment just added another log to the fire I'd been quietly building. By December, I was ready. I had the envelope made special. Heavy ivory stock, elegant enough to mask the blade tucked inside. Inside, a notarized letter. Simple, legal, unmistakable. It stated in crisp formal language that the lake house was no longer theirs, no longer part of the family legacy, no longer Ashley's summer playground or Dad's bragging right. It belonged to me, fully, irrevocably. There were no loopholes, no soft edges, just the truth, wrapped in embossed paper. a gift they'd never forget. And the best part? They'd never see it coming. But I didn't stop there. Nestled beneath that notarized claim of ownership, I added one more document, a scanned copy of the forged signature authorization, my name butchered in their attempt to mimic it. Highlighted in yellow was a brief note from my attorney, succinct but lethal. Identity theft. Punishable by law, action pending at the discretion of the victim. I wasn't filing charges, not yet. That wasn't the point. I just needed them to see it, to feel, for once, the weight of what they'd done, the precarious line they'd walked, the boundary they'd crossed. I wanted them to understand that the quiet, dependable daughter they'd buried, under years of condescension, now held their fate between her fingers. I sealed it all in a plain, unadorned white box. No ribbon, no glitter, no hint of sentimentality. Just truth, waiting like a landmine tucked neatly beneath the Christmas tree. And as the days crawled toward Christmas, I prepared. I rehearsed the smile, the silence, the casual shrug that would cover the storm brewing beneath my skin. There would be no yelling, no dramatic scene for them to dismiss as another overreaction. This time, my revenge would be precise, surgical. Christmas morning arrived on schedule, bringing with it the same suffocating performance we'd perfected over the years. The tree twinkled weakly in its corner, ornaments chipped and dulled by time. The fire popped and hissed, fighting against the chill no one acknowledged. The air smelled of burnt cinnamon and forced nostalgia. Ashley, radiant in her new silk pajamas, tore through gifts like a child rehearsing for a spotlight she was certain belonged to her. A designer bag, matching shoes, the usual parade of indulgences. My parents beamed at her, their pride unmistakable, as if her every breath deserved applause. And me? I sat in the same battered armchair I'd occupied since I was 16, my gift resting on my lap, unassuming, quiet, waiting. Finally, the moment arrived. I met my father's eyes, held them steady, and handed him the box. "This one's for you," I said, my voice steady, smooth, not a tremor. He laughed, glancing sideways at Ashley, smirking like it was all part of the familiar joke. "Feels light. Socks again?" I said nothing. His grin faltered as he lifted the lid. No card, no gadget, just the envelope, thick ivory sealed in blood-red wax. It sat in the center like a blade unsheathed. He hesitated, just a second, before breaking the seal. The room grew quieter than it had any right to be. Even Ashley paused, sensing something off as my father unfolded the papers, still holding his coffee like he could sip through whatever this was. But the moment his eyes found the first line, the color drained from his face. His grip faltered, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the edge of his cup. He read faster, then slower, his eyes desperate, searching for an escape clause that wasn't there. My mother leaned over his shoulder, curiosity flashing bright until she caught sight of the court seal stamped boldly across the page. Her breath caught audibly. The silence fractured, thick, suffocating as they realized what was in their hands. The notarized deed, naming me the sole owner of the lake house, the court confirmation of the auction, and beneath it, the final blow, the documentation of their crime. My father's jaw clenched so tight I thought he might shatter a molar. My mother's lips trembled, her festive blush draining fast. Ashley blinked, oblivious, still waiting for the punchline. But there wasn't one. I sat back, hands folded neatly in my lap, and waited. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to raise my voice. The message was already screaming loud enough. Her lips parted, a soft, shaky breath escaping as confusion flickered, then bloomed into full-blown panic. Slowly, She turned toward me, her voice barely more than a tremble skimming the edge of disbelief. What is this?" I met her gaze steadily, unflinching. "It's exactly what it looks like," I replied, my tone calm, almost gentle, like I was reading tomorrow's weather report instead of detonating a bomb in the middle of her carefully staged holiday dream. Her head snapped back to my father, words spilling out too low for me to catch. But I didn't need to hear. The way his face crumpled said it all. Not rage, not confusion, just the quiet, creeping devastation of a man realizing the trap he'd set years ago had finally snapped shut, right in front of everyone. That was the moment it all clicked for her. When she finally understood this wasn't just about the lake house. It wasn't just about me. It was about him, the man she trusted, the man who mortgaged their precious retirement dream behind her back, probably convincing himself he'd fix it before anyone noticed. Only the bank had moved faster. The auction was silent. By the time anyone realized what was missing, it was already mine. Ashley, bless her oblivious little heart, blinked rapidly. Her new designer purse clutched tight to her chest like a child holding a teddy bear in a storm. For once, she stayed silent, glancing between us as if waiting for someone to hand her a script. Dad didn't speak. He sat frozen, fists clenched around the documents, his hands still now. Too still. The kind of stillness that only comes when a man finally feels the ground vanish beneath him. And Mom? She stood so abruptly, her chair scraped hard against the floor. She stumbled back, wide-eyed, as though the truth had physically struck her. Her chest heaved, lips trembling around a question she couldn't quite form. Then she broke. Right there. Shoulders folding inward, voice cracking into a half-whispered, "How?" But the words were for no one, really. For the first time in my life, I saw her not as the towering figure who ruled our home, but as something smaller. Fragile, betrayed. A woman who had no idea the life she built was already on fire. I didn't move. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't fill the silence. I just let it sit, heavy, suffocating, as my revenge settled over the room like smoke after a burn. Because this wasn't about the deed or the house. This was about power, and, for the first time, it was mine. The silence was suffocating, so thick it pressed against my ribs. Ashley stayed frozen, knuckles white around that purse like it could shield her from the collapse. My father stared at the floor. My mother wavered, staring at me like a stranger, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was a reckoning. Slowly, deliberately, I stood, smoothed the hem of my sweater with steady hands. My voice came light, almost cheerful. "Thanks for breakfast?" It landed like a gunshot in that silent room. No one moved. No one spoke. Not even Ashley dared blink. And that was more satisfying than any screaming match or years-delayed fight could have ever been. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, slipping it on slowly, savoring the weight of the moment. No apologies, no explanations, no giving them the out they'd no doubt script later for themselves. I didn't need to. Actions, in this family, always spoke louder, and mine was already echoing. At the door, I paused, not to gloat, not to twist the knife, just to look. One last time, to burn their faces into memory, wide-eyed, ashen, grasping the full, terrible truth. Then I turned, and I walked out, leaving their perfect little world in ruins behind me. "And just so we're clear," I said, my gaze sweeping slowly, deliberately across each of their faces, "I won't be sharing the house, not this time. It's mine, all of it, and it's about damn time I start choosing me." The words settled like dust after an explosion. Quiet, inevitable. Ashley flinched, her brows knitting together as if the very concept of me holding something untouchable to her was physically unbearable. She opened her mouth, then shut it, lips pressed tight as she swallowed whatever protest had clawed its way up her throat. My mother. She stared at me with a look I couldn't quite name, part disbelief, part heartbreak, but mostly it was defeat. For once, she seemed to grasp that no amount of pleading or perfectly rehearsed guilt would land. Not this time. Maybe not ever again. And my father? He never even looked up. His eyes stayed locked on the paper in his hands, as if staring long enough might blur the ink, rewrite the ending, undo the trap he'd helped set. But it was too late. The reckoning had already arrived. I stepped back, fingers grazing the doorknob, then pulled the door closed with a soft click. Funny how a sound so small could feel like the loudest goodbye. There was no slam, no shouted farewell, just that single final sound, neat and irrevocable. The cold hit me immediately. Sharp, honest air slicing through the tension still clinging to my skin. But instead of shivering, I breathed deep, lungs filling like I hadn't drawn air properly in years. And in that moment, I felt it. Peace, not joy, not triumph, just a quiet, steady peace, the kind that settles in when you finally stop carrying weight that was never yours. By the time I reached the car, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. The tremble of muscles remembering what it feels like to let go, to exhale, to stop holding the line. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Whatever grief, rage, or scrambling excuses were happening behind that door, it wasn't mine to tend anymore. I had laid my truth bare on their polished dining table like a mirror they couldn't avoid. Whether they stared into it or smashed it was their burden now. Hours later, I sat curled in a worn armchair by the lake house window, a heavy blanket draped around my shoulders, faintly scented with cedar and years of neglect. Snow drifted lazily outside, soft and relentless, settling over the frozen lake like nature itself was burying the past. The silence was staggering. No voices, no sharp edges, just stillness. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand anything from you. I sipped my coffee slowly, the warmth seeping into places I hadn't known were cold. For the first time, I could hear myself think, really hear. And what surprised me most was the absence of rage. Just stillness. I thought, briefly, about calling a friend, spilling the entire story in a messy, wine-soaked confession. But the urge passed. Some victories don't need an audience. Some closures are best witnessed by no one at all. I didn't know if they'd ever reach out, if they'd beg, lie, or rewrite history in their favor. Maybe they would. Maybe they wouldn't. It didn't matter. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't chasing their guilt. I had drawn the line, and this time I wasn't crossing it, not for them, not for anyone. The irony, of course, was sharp. Now that I finally owned the thing they'd once prized most, I didn't even want it. Not really. But that was never the point. The point was proving that I could take it, that I could reclaim what they spent years carving out of me. My voice, my space, my dignity. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.